present to you a few slides covering the main outcomes from the 9th meeting of the Open Energy Working Group that was held in Geneva from the 16th to the 19th of September this year. I will first cover, in my presentation, I'll first cover a few bits of general information on the setup and the format and participation of the meeting. And then I'll walk you through a few slides presenting the main outcomes and decisions taken by the working group during its recent meeting. So first of all, in terms of its work program, the work program of the Open Energy Working Group is decided by the last COP in its decision 11/19. And basically, the work program is articulated around 5 main areas of work, namely the strategic issues, scientific technical matters, legal governance and enforcement matters, international cooperation and coordination, and program of work and budget. And as I walk you through the presentation, I will give you a little bit of outcome under each of these areas of work as the OEWG worked through this work program. The COP also at this last meeting elected the Bureau of the OEWG that you see in front of you. It's composed of 5 members. 2 co-chairs share the work. These were Mr. Prakash Kaulese from Mauritius, Ms. Magda Gosk from Poland, 2 vice chairs, Ms. Jacinth Seguin from Canada, Mr. Alberto Capra from Argentina, and Rapporteur Mr. Nasereddin Hedari from Islamic Republic of Iran. In terms of the organization of work of this meeting, this was also decided upon by the last Conference of the Parties to the Basel Convention, whereby it decided that it would be a 4-day meeting and with 2 days of interpretation into 6 UN languages, and 2 other days would be in English only for contact group work. So the way it was structured was that the first day and the last day were plenary sessions in the 6 languages with interpretation. And then the 2 middle days, the 17th and 18th September, were basically focusing on contact group work in English-only setting. The meeting was preceded by some pre-meetings on the Monday, 15th September, mainly to discuss and prepare the work on technical guidelines on POPs waste and e-waste. So this was in the morning. This was followed by a bureau meeting and then regional meetings in the afternoon. In terms of participation to the meeting, there were a total of 249 participants, out of which 96 were parties, 1 non-party, 9 IGOs, 13 NGOs, 2 United Nations bodies, and 7 business and industry entities. And for this meeting, financial support could be provided to all eligible parties requesting support, and this financial support was provided by Denmark, Finland, Germany, Japan, Norway, Sweden, and Switzerland. Now I'm going to walk you through a few slides that present the main outcomes of the meeting and the main decisions that were adopted following the main structure of the actual work program that I described earlier. So one of the first outcomes was a decision adopted on the Cartagena Declaration, in which it sets out a roadmap for action in the implementation of the Cartagena Declaration for consideration by COP12 next May. The roadmap that was developed by OEWG is structured around 4 main areas of action, which are listed here. Information gathering is the first, followed by developing strategies, enhancement of waste prevention, and engagement with relevant stakeholders. For each of these main areas of action, a number of specific activities are described, together with timelines and main actors. The decision also recommends to COP that it mandates either the expert working group working on ESM or a new intersessional working group to develop guidance to assist parties in developing efficient strategies to achieve the goals of the declaration. And it also recommends that COP12 or invites COP12 to invite a lead country within the group to carry out the work on the development of this guidance. Another main outcome under the general category of strategic issues is a decision that was adopted on options for the operations of the open-ended working group. An analysis had been presented and prepared by the Secretariat containing 3 options. And just briefly to remind you that option A was describing an approach that was taken at the previous open-ended working group at its 8th meeting. Second option, option B, described an approach that was basically the same approach, same format as the 9th meeting of the open-ended working group, and also a third option, option C, was described in this paper that establishes a technical subsidiary body which would replace the open-ended working group. This analysis was welcomed in this decision. The OEWG welcomes this analysis by the Secretariat and notes that there was a fair bit of discussion and varying views on these options expressed by parties during the meeting. The decision establishes also a process whereby parties and others may submit comments on their experience in the 9th meeting and how the format of this 9th meeting was held, and these comments will be welcomed by the 30th of November this year. And the Secretariat will then compile these comments and submit them to COP12 for its consideration. And it recommends that COP12 takes a decision based on, first of all, the Secretariat analysis that was put forward, the comments received by parties and others before, during, and after the meeting, and the views, as I said, the views expressed during the actual meeting, including a note that the importance of interpretation for non-English speaking countries. Moving on to technical issues, and I'm going to walk you through some of the main outcomes there. A decision was adopted on regarding the POPs waste technical guidelines. For you to note that there were 6 technical guidelines that were put forward for consideration and further work by the open-ended working group. And following its deliberations and its work, the open-ended working group adopted a decision that takes, on the one hand, that takes note of concentration levels to define low POPs contents. This was one of the discussions that took place. And it invites parties and others to provide comments on those levels by the 31st of October 2014. And yeah, maybe I should have noted that the 6 technical guidelines were prepared by a number of lead countries and lead organizations in consultation with the small intersessional working group that was established by the COP to prepare these guidelines. And following these comments received that I just described above, these lead countries and organizations were invited to revise the technical guidelines, taking into account these comments, and to prepare them by the 27th November for them to be submitted to the Secretariat for translation into 6 languages for consideration by COP12. Once this step has been done, in the decision, there's provisions for 2 further rounds of comments before the COP12. Based on this version of 27 November, parties and others may provide comments by 23rd January 2015. And the various lead countries and organizations will prepare revised versions of these guidelines by 6th of March 2015. And parties and others are again invited to provide further comments on these revised guidelines by 10th of April 2015. And all of these will be made available to COP12. Finally, the decision also recognizes the need to clarify the applicability to the Basel Convention of PPDE wastes, and it recommends to COP12 that the interpretation of the entry A3180 in Annex 8 of the Basel Convention is part of the program of work of the OEWG in its next biennium. In terms of an additional outcome on technical issues, the OEWG considered revised guidelines, technical guidelines on mercury wastes, and did some further work on these during the meeting, and adopted a decision on these guidelines, whereby it sets a process where parties and others are invited to submit further comments on the guidelines by 30 September 2014, and that the lead country working on these technical guidelines in consultation with the small intersessional working group to produce revised draft by 20 November that will also be submitted to the Secretariat to be translated in 6 official languages and to be considered by COP12 for adoption. Also, there's a possibility. There's 1 round of comments. So there's a process that's set up. So based on this version of 20 November, parties and others are invited to provide comments by 15 February 2015. And based on these comments, taking these into account, an updated version will be prepared by 21st March 2015. And the Secretariat is requested to use this version to prepare an information document for consideration by COP12. Another discussion that took place and a decision that was taken was on the e-waste technical guidelines. The open-ended working group considered a revised version of the technical guidelines on e-waste and did some further work in contact groups on these guidelines, in particular on the paragraph 26B, which was a paragraph for which there was a fair bit of discussion. And the working group adopted a decision that, first of all, takes note of the progress made during the OEWG on this issue of used equipment that should normally not be considered waste, which is included in paragraph 26B, and whereby the progress is that whereby there are 2 options that were developed, whereby one is for everyone to try and reach consensus or agreements through intersessional work on this paragraph before COP12, and the second option is that if there's no agreement on this paragraph before COP12, that the guidelines would include an agreed text that is in more general terms, and this would be an interim solution with the agreement that further work on this paragraph would need to be done following COP12. The decision also establishes a process whereby these revised guidelines should be submitted by 20 November to the Secretariat to be translated in 6 languages and posted on the website for consideration by COP12, and whereby there's one round of comments. So parties and others are invited to provide comments on this version of 20 November version by 28 February, specifically in particular on the options with regard to this paragraph 26b. And the Secretariat is to prepare an INF document taking into account these comments for consideration by COP12. Moving on to legal issues, the OEWG considered a draft glossary of terms with recommendations that was prepared by the Intersessional Working Group on that matter. And they adopted a decision that sets up a process whereby parties are invited to nominate additional experts to participate in this small intersessional working group by 15th of October this year, and whereby parties and others are to provide comments on these draft terms of the draft glossary of terms and further terms that are mentioned in the meeting report, on the OEWG meeting reports, and options for further steps towards consistent interpretation of this terminology. Also, OEWG invited the Small Intersessional Working Group to present to COP12 the revised version of the glossary based on the comments received by parties and others, and based on the discussions that took place at OEWG9, and to coordinate this with the expert working group working on ESM, and also invites the Small Intersessional Working Group to present recommendations to COP12 where further guidance would be useful and needed for updating guidelines and guidance documents that were previously adopted under the Basel Convention. Under national reporting, the OEWG considered a revised format for this national reporting, and it took a decision where it establishes a process whereby parties are invited to nominate additional experts to participate in the Small Intersessional Working Group by 31st of October. And in parallel, parties are invited to submit comments on the draft format and the revised draft formats also by 31st of October. And it requests the Small Intersessional Working Group to prepare an updated version of this format, taking into account on the one hand the discussion that took place in the OEWG9 and the comments received based on the process set in that decision. The OEWG also considered 4 guidance documents prepared by the ICC, the Implementation Compliance Committee, and it welcomed and it adopted the decision whereby it welcomed the work of the ICC on these guidance documents, and it provided comments on 3 of them to be considered by the ICC in finalizing them, and it also invited the ICC to consider revising the 4th one, which is the manual for the implementation of the convention, based on the comments received. The OEWG9 also adopted a decision on PACE. The PACE group provided a progress report to the meeting, and the OEWG welcomed this progress report and requested the Secretary to continue providing support to the group and to report back to COP12 on progress. The Open-Ended Working Group also adopted a decision on its work program for the next biennium, whereby parties and so a draft work program was presented to them and considered. Some comments were made during the meeting, and then a decision was adopted whereby parties and others are invited to provide further comments by 27th November, and it requested the Secretariat to further revise this work program in consultation with both the OEWG Bureau and the COP Bureau, and to present a version for consideration and adoption by COP 12. Now, there's a few bullets where these were not actual proper decisions adopted by OEWG, but where there was some discussion and where the OEWG took note of the information in the meeting reports. The first is on the developing of guidelines for ESM, and a few comments were made during the meeting, and they requested that these comments be conveyed to the expert working group for its consideration at its third meeting that will take place in January next year. On the consideration of a new entry into the annex to the Basel Convention, the entry B3025, after some discussion, the OEWG agreed that no further work would be needed on this new entry, as there was no consensus that was reached on this particular entry. Finally, the Secretariat provided a number of progress reports on several issues listed here. The first on the classification of and hazard characterization of wastes. This is work that's ongoing in cooperation with the World Customs Organization. Some work with regard to the environmentally sound dismantling of ships, whereby several programs are ongoing and pilot projects are ongoing. Some information was also provided on other international cooperation and coordination with various organizations and entities. Some information was also provided on financial matters, a report on financial matters, also a report on the implementation of activities relating to this current biennium was provided by the Secretariat. The Secretariat also provided some information on the Science Fair, which is an event that will take place in the margins of the 2015 COPs, and this information was contained in a document presented to OEWG. And finally, some information was provided on the first meeting of NFORCE that took place on 18-19 November in 2013 in Bangkok. So this concludes my presentation. Thank you very much. I would just like to add a couple of last things, is that the meeting reports will very soon be ready in advanced version, English advanced version, in the coming days while it's being translated. And that on the Basel Convention website, there's a letter that was posted which invited or reminded the parties and others of the different information they were invited by the working group to provide through the Secretariat. Thank you very much.